And they're going to do an intro of me first.
Welcome.
So that intro was meant to welcome me. I'm Coach Jackie. I'm your freedom mentor and your RV adventurist. I am super passionate about helping people experience more time freedom, money freedom, all that good stuff. And I'm here to welcome you guys to another session of this amazing summit of the Voices of Women Summit. And I've had the most amazing women on my track, not that I'm biased. But we've got a great new speaker coming up here, and her name is Nola Peacock. And she's going to talk about those 3 keys to boosting your child's confidence. And what's so crazy is I just had someone talking about confidence in the adult and the adult and musicians, and now we get to talk about the child side of it. I'm super excited. How you doing today, Nola?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you.
Excellent. You look wonderful.
So excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. So I'm curious, I would love to hear from you. How did you get so passionate about the 3 keys to boosting your child's confidence and get to where you are and why you do what you do?
Okay. Well, I have always loved working with kids. And in fact, I started at 16 as a piano teacher. And then I became a pediatric nurse. And I just, always just loved spending time with kids and realized that, a lot of that was mentoring. And then when I became a mom, right? And so I thought, I figured I've got this, right? Like here I am, a pediatric nurse and right, done all that. So yay me. But when they are your responsibility 24/7, it's a little different, I realized.
I love that.
Right? And unfortunately, when my son was about 15, 16 years old, he started struggling with depression and was actually suicidal. And it was, shortly after my divorce. And, there had just been, looking back, it's like, he had a lot to deal with as he was growing up. And it was his time that he had to do some healing. And, I had always been someone who, followed the rules and wanted to be, like the good mom and the, good this, whatever. I just strive to do my very best. And so, I felt like a complete failure. And, like, what kind of mother am I? And, here my son doesn't want to be here. And I felt so guilty and, ashamed, like I didn't want to tell people. And also worried for my son, because there was one day when I asked him, I said, "Are you thinking of ending your life?" And he said, "Yes." And then I said, "Do you have a plan?" My nursing background kicked in. And he said, "Yes." And I was just, I was devastated. And he was seeing a psychologist and we were, doing the things that I knew, right? The proper things to do. And it just wasn't working. And it wasn't until I sort of started tapping into my intuition and listening to my inner wisdom that things really started to shift. And one of the things that helped my son the most was playing the guitar. And I bought him a new guitar and a journal, and he used the lyrics. He, composed his own lyrics, and he used that as a way to work through his emotions and started to improve. And, and so now, he's a young adult. Well, I shouldn't say that young. I want people to think I'm younger than I really am. But anyway, he's 32 and, and doing great, loving life. And it's like, okay. And so, I learned so many things during that time. And, I would hear some of his friends, say similar things, like they didn't want to be here. And I had a girlfriend whose 9-year-old son was cutting himself. And I just thought, these kids need help. Like they need to have tools and strategies and ways to deal with their big emotions. And also for parents, because I realized how easy it is for us parents. Like we want what's best for our kids. And so we, tend to follow along sometimes, right, with what's, what we should be doing. And, I really believe that we need to listen to our intuition and really be our child's advocate. So that's why I'm so passionate about doing what I do. I just thought I've got to make a difference here.
Mm. You've given me goosebumps, and we've just started. So I want to thank you and honor you for sharing your story, because your story will change other people's lives the more and more you share it. We have another coach in the group here, Tammy, who coaches parents whose child is being bullied. And we need more and more of coaches like you guys and serving the world. And so definitely you and Tammy should connect, and she'd
Yes,
like to.
yes,
So
I would
we'll
love
share
to.
that in there. So a couple things I want to touch on. The one thing, when you said tap into your intuition and your inner knowing, I think that is so important in any aspect, right? But especially here, that and and as women, we know, we feel it, we ignore it. So why do you think we ignore it when we know it's just what the inner knowing of what we need to do?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. I mean, one is, society doesn't accept that inner knowing easily, right? It's like, and I mean, how many times, like, growing up, it's like, what were you thinking, right? Or why? Like, why? And for me, my intuitive sense is just this knowing. And so, people, well, why do you want to do that? And I'm kind of like, well, I don't know. It just, right. So to be able to say, well, I'm going to do it this way, it was really difficult. And then I think too, when we are attached to things, that can block our intuition. So, that's where sometimes we need to, get some outside help and just check in. And I know, for me, as I was saying with my son, it took a while for me to get there. And there was just, this one instant where this friend of ours started to give my son heck for not going to school, because that's what I kept hearing. Like, you got to get him to go to school. That's the most important thing. And there was, inside, I knew that wasn't true, but I kept, as being the good mom. And, when this woman started to give him heck, and I saw his face just drop, and I something inside me snapped, and I thought, that's it. I have to start listening to my intuition and my son's. And he was, when I started teaching some workshops, once he was doing much better, and the first one was in my home, just a small group of moms, and he came upstairs towards the end of it, and this one friend of mine said, can we ask you some questions? And he's like, sure. So he sat down with him, and the first question was, what did your mom do that helped, and what did she do that drove you crazy? And I'm like, oh, great. Like, what's going to come out of his mouth? This isn't rehearsed. And, but I felt so good, because he said what helped him the most was that I sat and just listened to him.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I would just sit with him, and other people tried to push him to do things. So it was like, okay, finally, now I'm getting it right.
So it's interesting that you said that, because that was one of my next questions, is what do you do to help these children or parents? Like, what is the first thing that you suggest doing? And the fact that someone asked that question in that moment, and you got to hear the answer straight from the individual, from your son, and that listening piece, nobody gets that kind of time anymore. Like, no one just gets dedicated time to someone just listen, versus wanting to respond to everything and solve it and fix it, and it's all from a place of love, right? But
Mhm.
it's still like, just listen. So what are some of the steps you take people through, children or adults, whichever one you want to touch on?
Okay. Well, the first thing that I teach to parents is the listening. And I have a thing, I call it active holistic listening. But, some of the most important things in this is, listening without judgment. Well, first of all, I say, you pretend you've got duct tape or a zipper across your mouth, like, just right. Because we want to, I mean, I get it. We want to be helpful. We want to ask questions. We want to give advice, but just listen, let the kids, share things, and do it without judgment. Because again, it's so easy to jump in, and even if it's, we make a comment, say maybe they're complaining about their teacher and their homework or whatever. And maybe if we say something about, oh, your teacher, she shouldn't do that or whatever, that judgment, right? It will shut kids down. And they also, it's like, well, I was only talking about their friend or their teacher or whatever. I wasn't judging them, but you're setting, that example. And so when they are, scared or you know, need to be really vulnerable with you, they're not going to open up because of that fear of judgment. So if you can sit and just listen, right? And then once they're done, and I mean, and here's another little tip is just you nod and then if they stop, you can say, well, tell me more, right? Or just be quiet, because you know how, when you're talking to somebody and there's that, few moments of silence and we want to jump in because that silence is uncomfortable. Well, stay quiet and your kid will feel uncomfortable, right? And that's often when those real nuggets, come out, right? When they really feel that they can share.
Mm-hmm.
And then, acknowledging how they feel. And I know, like right now there is a national crisis. There, survey done in 2022, and our anxiety and depression in kids is skyrocketing. And so I think it's so important for kids to be able to come and talk to their parents, right? And have that safe place. So, by not judging and just, really listening and then acknowledging. So if your kid's saying, like, oh, I don't have any friends, this sucks, and whatever, don't start jumping in and saying, oh, but you've got, so-and-so is your friend, because that's just, you're not listening. They're not being heard, right? So if you say, wow, that must be really tough. I hear you. That's right. And let them just let that out. And the magic piece, and I've seen this over and over with young people, is that then they'll actually start to come out of it themselves. They'll start to go, well, yeah, actually, I do have this friend, or right. And I still remember working with a teenager, and she had actually attempted suicide, and she had been through the hospital program. But when her and I talked, and again, I just, I really, really listened to her, and she said, "You're the only one who gets me." And I was shocked. I thought that, that really breaks my heart. We need more people to be able to do that, to make the kids feel like they're understood. So, I think that listening piece is just, it's so, so crucial.
Yeah, and Tammy gave you a big amen, great advice in the thing, because we both agree it's spot on. So listening, asking good questions versus telling is what I heard as well, and then acknowledgement.
Yes.
And acknowledging, I love that one, because you're not discounting their feelings or discounting what they believe in or what they're thinking at this point. It's acknowledgement, and it gives them that freedom to just really be vulnerable and honest. It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So I noticed something else in some information, like the bio that you sent and the information about going through a cancer journey, which also helped you realize. Can you realize how self-love and having a routine for self-care is so important? Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Well, as I had been a pediatric oncology nurse, so I had worked with children with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2018, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And of course, the last thing that I was expecting to hear. And my first thought was, even though as a nurse, I know that this wasn't true, but my first thought was, I'm going to die. Right. That's where I went. And I just thought, whoa, like, that's not going to help. So, and I realized that, the things that I teach kids around mindset and taking care of themselves and loving themselves, I thought, I gotta walk my talk. And so, I just see that as so important. And the other thing, when we're in fear, right, our immune system is compromised, right? And it doesn't help when we're in that fight or flight. And whether that's, because, with my diagnosis, or, kids being bullied or being afraid, right? When they're in that fight or flight, we're not able to think clearly. We can't, right? And it affects our immune system and so many things. So I chose to go through my journey with love. I wasn't going to fight cancer. I wasn't going to battle it, because that would trigger me. And I just wanted to do it through love. And, I created meditations and stuff so that my chemotherapy was my liquid love and stuff. And I just see that all the time. And when I'm working with kids, I love when I can reflect back to them, right? Because when I see kids, and this is something that I have always, I think I see kids for who they are, their authentic self. And even as a nurse, sometimes, the other nurses would go, oh, this kid is so difficult or whatever. I never found them that way. right?
Mm.
And I could get kids to do things that, you know, they would fight other nurses with. But I realize now it's because I saw who they were, right? And I acknowledged what they were going through and loved them. And you know, helping them to, you know, to love themselves. And I remember this one little guy who was 6 years old, and he had been bullied for quite a while. And he came to see me, and he had a dark hoodie on. It was up, you know, over his head, and he was looking down. And you know, I just, you know, started talking and listening to him a bit and reflecting back a bit. And pretty soon, you know, the hood came off, and sitting up, and, you know, very proud of who he was. And, you know, I mean, and that was just in, you know what, like 15 minutes. And it's like, so love is so powerful, right? So I think setting that example for our kids. So, you know, when I'm working with kids, I also work with the parents. They always get homework from me, and that is something every week. They've got to do something for themselves to nurture themselves and fill them up. And, you know, and I have kids come to me and go, my mom and dad were really happy this week, right? Like they notice that,
Right.
you know, parents are loving themselves. And it also sets an example, right? When you take time and do things to nurture yourself, your kids see that, and then, you know, they will model it too. So
I gotta say, your energy is definitely starts with love. I can feel it. I just feel it when I'm around you. We have a great question, if we're gonna,
right.
from Tammy, and it says, "How can a parent prepare themselves to have a conversation with their child?"
Very good question. And I think, as you said, you know, energy, right? Everything is energy, and kids are so sensitive to our energy. So it's important to check in with yourself. And again, if you know ahead of time what you're going to talk about, and it's a difficult situation, you know, you may want to even get some support ahead of time, but really check in and, you know, how do I feel about it? And, you know, as best you can, put your, you know, your feelings aside if you've got some strong feelings about what's going on, and just, you know, put yourself in your child's shoes, right? And think about, you know, how good does it feel to be listened to be acknowledged, to be right. And you know, I mean, I've worked with hundreds of kids, and you know, they don't want to upset their parents, they don't want to bother them, they don't want to hurt them, right? It's just, and so, you know, letting your kids know that mistakes are okay, and right, they can, and that you've always got their back. Because I think, you know, there's nothing worse than, you know, seeing a kid who's feeling troubled and going through some, you know, tough things, and yet they feel like they can't go to their parents, right? There's no way, there's, you know, no way out of it. So, you know, check in with your energy first, take some nice deep breaths, you know, get some support if you need. And then, you know, and another thing just um you know, we often like to have that, you know, face to face, and have kids look us in the eye and stuff. And that, of course, when kids are wanting to be vulnerable, that's really difficult, right? And we know that too, right? When we're trying to when we talk about something difficult, we'll often look away or whatever. So, you know, I let kids, I mean, they can play with something, they can have something in their hands, and you know, they don't need to be looking at me. So that's another thing. So in the car is a great place to have conversations.
Oh,
They can get away from
yes.
you, and they don't have to look at you. So,
Yes. Oh my
yeah.
gosh. My friends do say they have some of the best conversations in the car rides, like to school. Well, not so much to school because they're half asleep, but on the way home from school or when they're going
Right?
places. That's
Yeah.
great advice. Tammy said, absolutely, that's great advice. And that kids are so aware and notice everything,
Right?
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That
You
energy piece
can't
that
fool
you
them.
mentioned,
Mhm.
you can't. No, I personally don't have kids, but I have two dogs, and they are cued into your energy just
Right?
like a child. And I'm like, if I'm here, like they know exactly what's going on at all times. I'm like, it's kind of creepy, but it's kind of cool at the same time.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Kids are just,
um, I would love to know what kind, we've got a couple minutes here. What kind of homework do you give the parents? Like, I'm curious. We've talked a lot about the children's side of things, but what do you give the parents?
well, I get them to talk about, you know, make a list of things that fill them up and nurture them. And it can be, you know, little things. It doesn't have to be big things, but often, I mean, we're right. Parents are so busy, and they're busy, you know, taking care of everything, the groceries, the, you know, the cooking, cleaning, all that stuff, and driving their kids to and from, and they forget, right, what to do for themselves. So creating that list is one thing, and then getting them to do one thing off of that every week. Um, and also, you know, I mean, as we get in, you know, deeper when working with parents, it's, you know, there's wounds, like there's things that can trigger us, right? And
Mhm.
we have to, we have to do our own work. Like often, I realize now looking back that when my son was going through, that depression and stuff, well, I was too. I was having a difficult time. And so I had to do my healing in order for my son to be able to do his. So, so
That is
some of that will be.
that is huge right there.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh. It starts with us. Starts with
Right?
us.
It really
Whoever we
does.
are, it starts
Yeah.
with us, and everyone gets the
Mhm.
best version of us when we do exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
Nourishment list. I had a nourishment list when I started. My
Did
coach
you?
made me do a nourishment list too. And it was a nourishment list because we realized after I wasn't doing anything for myself.
Yeah.
And I was avoiding myself at all costs. And a nourishment list brings you back to you. So great
Yes,
advice.
it
All right.
does.
So, with all of this amazing advice, amazing guidance that you have in this area, what free gift are you giving the folks to take away from this event?
It's a PDF that I've created, and it's Empower Your Child, and it's got more tips than what I've shared today, and also some activities, things that you can do with your kids, so that you can, start implementing these things right away. So
I just clicked on it and I'm sharing it because I have quite a few. I mean, all my friends and clients have kids too, and I get a lot of conversation. So I'm going to share that with them. I'm excited for that. But you also are actually giving them a VIP gift too. Anyone who upgrades the VIP, there's extra special gifts that normally cost somewhat of an investment, but you're giving it to them in the VIP package for free.
yes.
So
And
tell me about that.
so excited about that too. So I will spend half an hour with parents, and we will do a mini plan and come up with steps to help you with your child, with whatever's going on, child, teen, whatever.
Mm,
And if there aren't a bunch of issues, the one thing that I'm really good at too is helping kids to do their chores without parents asking.
mm.
So, if your kids are happy and doing great, you're not worried about their
What's that?
comments. There's still other things that we can work on. So
Wait a second, wait a second, wait a second. Who wants that? Your kids to do the chores without having to ask. That's like magic wand stuff. Like that's like pixie dust, right, Tammy? Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, you said a lot of amazing things tonight, but I think that right there would change the world, change the
right.
parents' world. No, I just think it's amazing and what you do, and it's so needed in this world. And I have such admiration for folks who work. So even though teaching didn't work out for us in the beginning, look at all the teaching that you get to do now, but you get to do it in your own business, right? In your own way, your own methods. So excited for you. So real quick, I wanted to let the folks know the next person coming up is going to be Tara Nolan, and her topic is going to be manifest your dream life and business. Oh, we've talked about confidence in adults, confidence with children. We've covered all that aspect. Now let's take it and manifest our dream lives and businesses. Oh, so good. So I really appreciate everything you shared with us, Nola. You are changing lives with what you do. I do have one final question for you. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
What are some words of wisdom that you would love to share with the folks watching, and are people going to be watching the replay and everything, that you want them to take away?
Well, I think, this is something that I always say to people, and it's just always follow your heart. Like really tap in, go within for your answers, teach your kids to do the same, and, life will be great.
I got to show you something real quick because you're hitting it so many times. I got to show you. Last year I got a tattoo and it says, "What would love do?" And so it reminds me, it anchors me in every time when I'm like, all the things, and I'm like, "What would love do?" And the back of it says,
Oh, it's beautiful.
infinite love, because
Oh,
we
I love
forget how we are worthy of infinite love.
right. Yeah.
And when we get to the point, what you're talking about, so crucial that when the parents get to this place of loving themselves infinitely, then their children will respond to that.
Yes.
So good. Okay, well, I gotta say, it has been a pleasure meeting you. I look forward to staying in touch. Tammy's got your information. They dropped your information in the chat so she can reach out to you as well. And thank you so much for being here. Everybody, this is Coach Jackie. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one, and give you a big cheers for being here. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Jackie.
Welcome back to the Voices of Women Summit, where in honor of International Women's Day 2023, we are raising the voices of hundreds of women so that their